The stars looked cold through the viewport of the research vessel, Horizon's Edge. Captain Ji-woo Park stood on the bridge, watching the asteroid field drift past like ancient monuments in an empty graveyard. His crew had been mapping this sector for 3 months now, collecting data on mineral deposits and spatial anomalies. Nothing exciting, nothing dangerous, just routine work at the edge of human-explored space. That morning, everything changed. The alarms screamed first. Red lights flooded the bridge as the sensors picked up multiple contacts, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Ji-woo's hands moved across the console, pulling up the tactical display. Their designs were unmistakable even at this distance. Vreldian Empire warships, their hulls covered in the characteristic ridge patterns that made them look like predators even when standing still. "Get us out of here," Ji-woo ordered, but he already knew it was too late. The Vreldians had positioned themselves perfectly, boxing the Horizon's Edge into a trap with no escape route. Dr. Hana Choi rushed onto the bridge, her research tablet clutched against her chest. "Vreldians," Ji-woo confirmed. "Start the emergency protocols. Purge all sensitive data." Down in the security section, Lieutenant Dae-jung Kim was already moving. He had felt something wrong minutes before the alarms, that sixth sense that had kept him alive through dozens of missions. He moved through the corridors with purpose, checking on crew members, making sure everyone was following evacuation procedures. Most of them had no idea who he really was. They knew him as a quiet security consultant, someone who kept to himself and did his job without fuss. The first impact shook the ship. The Vreldians weren't trying to destroy them, they were using magnetic grapples to lock the vessel in place. Dae-jung heard the hull breach, charges detonate in 3 locations. Boarding parties. He reached for his sidearm, then stopped. His orders had been clear when he took this assignment. Maintain cover at all costs. SEAL Team 7 couldn't afford to have their operators exposed, especially not out here where intelligence was thin. He removed his weapon and placed it carefully in a storage locker. Then he walked toward the main corridor, where the crew was gathering. The Vreldians came through like a storm. They were massive creatures, standing over 7 feet tall, with scales that shifted between dark green and gray. Their armor was heavy, practical, designed for intimidation as much as protection. They carried plasma rifles that hummed with barely contained energy. When they spoke, their voices came out as harsh barks and growls, translated through collar devices into rough human language. "On your knees, hands visible, resist and die." The crew complied. There was nothing else to do. Ji-woo caught Dae-jung's eye across the crowd, saw something there that gave him a flicker of hope, though he couldn't say why. The security consultant looked calm. Too calm. Like a man who had been in worse situations and survived. They were herded into a transport ship, a dark metal box that smelled of ozone and something organic that made Hana's nose wrinkle. The flight took hours. No one spoke. The Vreldian guards watched them with eyes that showed only contempt. One of them, bigger than the others with decorative scars across his face, walked slowly past each prisoner, studying them like insects in a collection. When he reached Dae-jung, he paused. Dae-jung met his gaze without flinching. The Vreldian laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Humans. So weak. So slow. You play at being soldiers, but you are children with toys." He moved on, still chuckling. The prison moon of Carvos 7 appeared through the viewport like a gray scar against space. It was an ugly place, all stone and metal, covered with facilities that looked like they had been carved directly into the rock. The transport descended into a landing bay that echoed with the sounds of other ships, other prisoners, other stories of defeat. Processing was efficient and brutal. The Vreldians stripped them of personal belongings, ran biological scans, cataloged them like cargo. Dae-jung watched everything, memorizing layouts, counting guards, noting weapon types, and security measures. Old habits. They couldn't be turned off even when he wanted them to be. Overlord Threx ruled this facility. He was an older Vreldian, his scales marked with age and battle scars, his eyes cold with the certainty of someone who had never lost. When the human prisoners were brought before him, he regarded them with obvious disappointment. "The great humans," Threx said, his translator giving his words a mocking tone. "The species that barely reached their own moon before we had conquered a dozen star systems. You are weak. Your bodies break easily. Your lifespans are pathetically short. And yet you spread across space like an infection, claiming worlds you have no right to claim." He walked down the line, stopping at Hana. "A scientist. Perhaps useful. Then Jiwoo. A navigator. We have better computers. Then Daejung." Threx leaned close, studying him. "And what are you?" "Security consultant." "How boring." Daejung said nothing. His file had been prepared carefully, scrubbed of anything that might draw attention. Just another ex-military contractor trying to make credits on the frontier. The classified databases were layers deep, encrypted beyond anything the Vreldians would think to check for such an unremarkable prisoner. "Take them to Block 7, Threx ordered. "Standard protocols. They will be processed for labor assignment in 3 weeks. Until then, let them contemplate their situation." The cells were small, carved from the moon's rock with force fields across the openings. Daejung was placed alone in one, which suited him fine. He sat on the hard bench that served as a bed and closed his eyes. Not to sleep, to think, to plan, to remember his training. The Vreldians had made their first mistake. They had captured him alive. Now they would learn what that meant. The days on Carvos 7 blended together in a gray monotony that was designed to break spirits. Wake cycle, food ration, work detail, sleep cycle. Repeat. The Vreldians ran their prison with mechanical efficiency, treating prisoners like equipment that needed minimal maintenance to remain functional. Daejung used every moment. While other prisoners struggled with despair, he studied. Guard shift changes happened every 8 hours with a 5-minute overlap. The security cameras had blind spots near the ventilation grates. The force fields on the cells ran on backup power systems that took 3 seconds to engage if the main grid failed. The guards carried their weapons on the right side, confident that no prisoner would dare attack them. During exercise periods in the common yard, he met others from the horizon's edge. Jiwoo looked thinner, his face drawn with worry. Hana had bruises on her arms from rough handling by guards who thought humans were too fragile to complain about. But there were others too. New faces, from different captures. Taemin Yoon was young, maybe 25, an engineer who had been taken from a colony ship 2 months earlier. He had the nervous energy of someone trying to stay hopeful in a hopeless place. When he first saw Daejung, something in his eyes lit up. "You were military," Taemin said quietly during their work shift in the processing facility. "Real military, I mean. Not just regular service." Daejung didn't answer directly. "What makes you say that?" "The way you move. The way you watch everything. My brother was Army. Special Forces. You have that same look." "Your brother teach you anything useful?" Taemin managed a small smile. "How to hotwire a transport. How to break into a secured terminal. How to stay alive when things go bad." "Hold on to those lessons," Daejung said. "You might need them." On the 3rd week, Sujin Lee arrived. She was a pilot, captured during a skirmish near the border colonies. The Vreldians had destroyed her ship, but kept her alive because pilots were valuable for interrogation. She was tough, her eyes hard, with anger that she kept carefully controlled. During mealtime, she sat across from Daejung and studied him with the directness of someone who had commanded others. "I know what you are," she said without preamble. "What am I?" "Special operations. Probably Navy. You've got that water-world calm that SEALs have. Like you could drown the enemy and yourself if it meant completing the mission." She leaned forward. "So, what's the plan? When do we move?" "We don't," Daejung said simply. "Not yet." Sujin's jaw tightened, but she nodded. She understood patience. She understood timing. The turning point came during the 4th week. New orders came down from Overlord Threx. High-value prisoners were being transferred to different facilities. Some would go to labor colonies, others to research stations where Vreldian scientists could study human physiology. A few would simply disappear into interrogation centers that no one returned from. Daejung's name was on the transfer list. So were Ji-woo, Hana, Tae-min, and Soo-jin. They had 3 days. During the daily inspection, a guard decided to have some fun. He was younger than most, eager to prove himself to his superiors by demonstrating dominance over the weak humans. When Hana didn't move fast enough to suit him, he struck her across the face with the back of his hand. She fell hard, her lips split and bleeding. The other prisoners froze. Violence from the guards wasn't new, but something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the casual cruelty. Maybe it was the laughter from the other Vreldian guards. Maybe it was just that they had all reached their limit. Da-young moved. One moment he was standing 3 meters away. The next he was inside the guard's reach. His hand locked around the Vreldian's wrist. The guard outweighed him by at least 100 pounds and had natural armor plating. But Daejung knew exactly where to apply pressure, how to use leverage, where the joints bent in ways they weren't meant to bend. 3 seconds. That's all it took. The guard's weapon clattered to the floor. The guard himself was on his knees, his arm twisted at an angle that made the other Vreldians step back in shock. Daejung held him there, his face calm, his breathing steady. "She's a scientist," Daejung said quietly. "A non-combatant. You will treat her with respect." He released the guard and stepped back. The weapons came up immediately. Plasma rifles aimed at his chest. Daejung raised his hands slowly, showing he was finished. The moment of violence was over as quickly as it had begun. The guards dragged him away. Overlord Threx wanted to see him personally. The Overlord's office was more comfortable than the cells, with furniture designed for Vreldian bodies and screens showing various parts of the facility. Threx sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of metal, his eyes fixed on Daejung. "That was foolish," Threx said. "I could have you executed for attacking my guard." "He attacked a prisoner first," Daejung replied. "I was defending her." Threx studied him for a long moment. "You have training, real training. Not the basic combat instruction we see in most human security personnel." He pulled up a file on his screen. "Your record says you served in Earth's Navy. Nothing remarkable. In STAME, in Recordy. Average marks. Standard deployments." "That's correct. And yet you moved like someone who has killed before, many times." Daejung said nothing. Threx leaned back. "I think there is more to you than this file suggests. Perhaps I should look deeper." He made a gesture of dismissal. "Isolation for 1 week. Let you think about your choices, and I will think about running a more thorough background check." The isolation cell was smaller, darker, designed to be uncomfortable. Daejung sat in the corner and closed his eyes. Threx had made a mistake. 2 mistakes, actually. First, he had shown that the official file could be questioned. Second, he had admitted he would dig deeper, which meant Threx would contact Vreldian intelligence, which meant someone would run Daejung's biometrics through their captured database of Earth military personnel, which meant they would find the sealed files, the classified records, the name that had been earned through blood and fire across a dozen operations. Reaper. Daejung allowed himself a small smile in the darkness. The Vreldians had no idea what they had caught, but they were about to find out. And when they did, their comfortable certainty about human weakness would shatter like glass under a hammer. The clock was ticking now. Threx had started a countdown without realizing it. In a few days, maybe less, the response would come back from intelligence. And then, everything would change. Daejung settled into a meditation position, slowing his breathing, preparing his mind and body for what was coming. He had been patient, He had been careful. He had maintained his cover as long as possible. But soon, very soon, the mask would come off. And the Vreldians would learn why humans had survived every predator that had ever hunted them. Why they had climbed from primitive hunters to masters of their own world. Why they were called the species that refused to quit. The Reaper was about to wake up. The response from Vreldian intelligence arrived during the night cycle, marked with encryption codes that made Overlord Threx's communication officer hesitate before forwarding it to his superior. High-priority intelligence packets were rare. Ones with this level of security classification were almost unheard of for a simple prisoner background check. Threx was reviewing daily reports when the file appeared on his screen. He opened it with casual curiosity, expecting perhaps a note that the human had been involved in some minor military incident that hadn't made it into the public records. What he found instead made his scales go pale. The file was extensive. Page after page of operational reports, all heavily redacted, but with enough detail visible to paint a terrifying picture. Threx read slowly, his hands gripping the edges of his desk tighter with each line. Lieutenant Dae-Young Kim. Serial number classified. Unit assignment classified. Call sign. Reaper. Reaper. The name was highlighted in red with a warning flag that Threx had only seen once before, on a file about a Krylax war criminal who had destroyed an entire colony moon. He kept reading. Each operation summary was worse than the last. The Ganymede Station infiltration, where a single human operator had penetrated a facility with over 200 Krylax soldiers and eliminated their entire command structure without triggering a single alarm. The Outer Rim pirate suppression, where this same operator had boarded a hostile carrier, alone, and destroyed it from the inside using improvised explosives and close-quarters combat. 47 confirmed solo deep penetration operations. Over 200 enemy combatants eliminated. 0 failed missions. The intelligence assessment was clinical and brutal. Subject represents Tier 1, extreme threat. Recommend immediate termination if captured. Do not attempt interrogation. Do not attempt imprisonment. Subject has demonstrated ability to escape from maximum security facilities and convert any environment into tactical advantage. Psychological profile indicates enhanced resistance to torture, extreme stress tolerance, and willingness to sacrifice personal safety for mission completion. There was more. Testimonials from other alien species who had encountered this human. The Krylax commander who survived called him the ghost that bleeds. A Teleran merchant, captain who witnessed one of his operations, said, "He moves like death itself has learned to walk." There were grainy security photos showing a figure in dark tactical gear, face obscured, moving through various hostile environments. And now, this human was in Threx's prison, had been for almost a month. Walking among the guards, observing, learning, planning. Threx slammed his fist on the desk and activated the facility-wide alert. Lockdown! Full security lockdown! All guards to maximum readiness. He pulled up the security feed for the isolation cell where Dae-Jung was being held. The camera showed an empty cell. The force field was intact. The door was sealed. But the prisoner was gone. How? Threx whispered. His communication officer appeared at the door, looking panicked. Sir, we're receiving reports from Block 7. 3 guards unconscious. Weapons missing. And sir, there's a message. On their armor. Written in their own blood. What does it say? It says, at that exact moment, across the facility, the main power grid flickered and died. Emergency lights engaged, bathing everything in red. The backup systems kicked in 3 seconds later, but 3 seconds was enough for a man like Dae-Jung Kim. He had been preparing for this moment since the day he arrived. The ventilation system on Carvos 7 was designed for Vreldian body sizes, which meant it was spacious enough for a human to move through, if he didn't mind tight spaces and poor air quality. The grates were secured with simple mechanical locks that could be picked with improvised tools. The guards never checked the vents, because no Vreldian could fit through them. But Dae-jung could. He had spent his isolation time carefully loosening the vent cover in his cell, working at it with a piece of metal he had pried from his bench. When the power died, exactly as he had calculated it would once Threx sent his inquiry to intelligence, he removed the grate and slipped into the darkness. The facility's layout was memorized. Guard positions were predictable. Weapon lockers were marked on the maps he had built in his mind. He moved through the vents like a shadow, emerging only when necessary to neutralize guards, not killing them. Not yet. Just rendering them unconscious with precision strikes to nerve clusters, taking their weapons and equipment, marking them with messages designed to spread fear. Psychology was as much a weapon as any gun. Make the enemy afraid. Make them paranoid. Make them see threats in every shadow. Halfway across the galaxy, in Earth's naval headquarters, Admiral Hyun-woo Nam received a priority alert. He had been expecting it, though he had hoped it wouldn't come. The alert was simple. Reaper package compromised. Location identified. Status unknown. Hyun-woo had served with Dae-jung years ago, back when they were both young officers learning what it meant to operate in the black. He knew what the man was capable of. He also knew what capture by the Vreldians could mean. "Get me Commander Young-sik Bae," he ordered. "Tell him to prep his team. Full gear. We're going in." Young-sik was already in the briefing room when the call came. He had felt it somehow. The way operators sometimes did. He and Dae-jung had served together on Team 7 for 6 years. They had pulled each other out of situations that should have been fatal. They had a connection that went beyond friendship, forged in places where only trust kept you alive. "How long?" Young-sik asked, when Hyun-woo appeared on the screen. 48 hours to reach the sector. Insertion teams are being assembled now. But Commander, there's something you need to know. The Vreldians have identified him. They know who they caught. Young-sik felt his stomach drop. Then we need to move faster. If they know, they'll either kill him or throw everything they have at keeping him contained. "There's a third option," Hyun-woo said quietly. "He might not wait for us." That was the truth that made Young-sik both proud and terrified. Dae-jung Kim didn't need rescue. He had probably been planning his escape since the moment he was captured. The mission now wasn't extraction. It was making sure their brother didn't die doing something heroic and stupid. Back on Carvos 7, Threx was learning just how accurate that assessment was. Over the next 6 hours, his facility descended into chaos. Guards were found unconscious in pairs and groups. Weapon caches were raided. Security systems were compromised. The worst part was the messages. Every incident came with a message. Each one more unsettling than the last. 73 visible cameras. You're missing 6. Guard shift change has a 5-second window. I've used it 12 times today. Your security codes are based on Vreldian birth months. Too predictable. Threx ordered more troops. He sealed sections of the facility. He tried to predict where the human would strike next. Nothing worked. It was like fighting smoke. The Reaper was everywhere and nowhere, turning Threx's own prison into a hunting ground. The other prisoners watched in amazement. Sujin smiled for the first time in months when she heard the guards talking nervously in the corridors. Ji-woo felt hope stirring in his chest. Hana began to understand that the quiet security consultant had been something far more dangerous all along. Tae-min was the first to see him. Dae-jung appeared at his cell during a brief power fluctuation, his face painted with dark marks, wearing stolen guard armor that he had modified to fit his smaller frame. He carried weapons with the confidence of someone who had been born holding them. "When the doors open," Dae-jung said quietly, "follow the blue marks on the walls. They'll lead you to the others. Stay quiet. Stay low. And trust me." Then he was gone again, vanished into the shadows before Taemin could even respond. Overlord Threx stared at his screens, watching his perfect prison fall apart around him, and realized with cold certainty that he had made a terrible mistake. The Vreldians had always assumed human weakness. They had conquered dozens of species and found humans to be among the least physically impressive, but they had never encountered a human like this. A predator who used intelligence instead of strength. A warrior who turned every disadvantage into an advantage. A soldier who fought not with rage but with cold, calculated precision. The Reaper was loose in his facility. And Threx had no idea how to stop him. The liberation began at midnight station time. Daejung had spent 18 hours moving through the facility like a ghost, marking pathways, disabling security measures, and positioning equipment for what came next. Now it was time to act. The power failure was more dramatic this time. Not just a flicker, but a complete blackout that lasted for 30 full seconds. In that half-minute of darkness, Daejung opened 17 cell doors. The prisoners who stumbled out found themselves following blue luminescent marks painted on the walls with stolen chemical markers. The marks led them through corridors that should have been guarded but weren't, past security checkpoints that should have been active but had been disabled. Ji-woo was the first to reach the designated gathering point in an abandoned storage section. Then came Hana, looking scared but determined. Tae-min arrived with 3 other engineers from his colony ship. Soo-jin appeared with a group of military personnel who had been captured during border skirmishes. Within an hour, there were 43 freed prisoners hiding in a section of the facility that the Vreldians had forgotten about. Daejung addressed them quietly, his voice carrying authority without needing to be loud. "We're not escaping yet. First, we're going to make this facility unusable for the Vreldians. Then we're going to make them negotiate. And if they won't negotiate, we're taking their ship." Soo-jin studied him with new respect. "You've done this before. Turned a prison into an operation base. Finger, day sign. Tech time, twice," Daejung confirmed. "The Krylax facility on Ganymede. The Teleran detention center at Proxima. Same principles. Turn their strengths into weaknesses. Make them afraid of their own shadows." He assigned roles based on skills. Tae-min and the engineers would work on accessing the facility's main systems. Ji-woo would use his navigation knowledge to plot escape routes through the surrounding asteroid field. Hana would coordinate medical support for injured prisoners. Soo-jin would organize the military personnel into teams capable of defending their position. Over the next 3 days, Carvos 7 transformed from a prison into a war zone. Daejung taught the former prisoners guerrilla tactics. Hit and fade. Misdirection. Psychological warfare. He showed them how to create improvised weapons from maintenance equipment. How to set traps in corridors. How to use the facility's own security systems against the guards. The Vreldians tried everything to regain control. They sent in assault teams that got ambushed in narrow passages. They tried to starve the prisoners out, only to discover that Daejung had already secured food and water supplies. They threatened to execute prisoners they still held. But Daejung broadcasted evidence of their war crimes on captured communication equipment, sending it to neutral trading posts and galactic news networks. Overlord Threx watched his career crumble in real time. The human called Reaper was always 3 steps ahead, turning what should have been a simple containment operation into a disaster that was attracting attention from across the galaxy. That's when the Crimson Talon arrived. War Marshal Korvan commanded the elite strike frigate with the experience of someone who had fought in 20 campaigns across a dozen star systems. He was old for a Vreldian, his scales marked with the scars of battles that had turned into legends. When he received orders to deal with the Carvos 7 situation, he read the files carefully. Unlike Threx, Korvan didn't underestimate humans. He had fought them before during the border conflicts, and he knew they were dangerous when cornered. But this was different. This wasn't a regular human soldier. This was Reaper. Korvan landed his ship with military precision and immediately took command of the situation. He walked through the damaged sections of the facility, studying the tactics used. He interviewed guards who had survived encounters with the escaped prisoners. He analyzed the psychological warfare techniques being employed, and he came to a conclusion that made him both impressed and worried. "This human isn't just fighting us," Corvin told Threx. He's teaching the others how to fight. He's building an army from prisoners who had no training. In 3 days, he's done what takes most military academies 3 months. Threx looked defeated. How do we stop him? Corvin thought for a long moment. We don't. Not with force. He's too good for that. We talked to him. That night, Corvin accessed the facility's communication array and broadcast on all channels. Lieutenant Kim, I am War Marshal Corvin of the Vreldian Empire. I have studied your service record. I have seen what you've accomplished here. You are a warrior of considerable skill, and I offer you respect as one soldier to another. There was silence for 30 seconds. Then, Daijung's voice came through, calm and controlled. You have my attention, War Marshal. I offer terms. Surrender yourself, and your people will be treated as prisoners of war under galactic conventions. No slavery, no executions. Fair treatment until a proper exchange can be arranged with Earth. And if I refuse, then I will reduce this facility to atoms. I have the firepower to do so. You've fought well, Lieutenant, but you cannot win against a warship. Another pause. When Daejung spoke again, his voice had changed. It carried a weight that made even Corvan's experienced soldiers shift uncomfortably. War Marshal, you seem like a reasonable being. So I'm going to give you a counteroffer. You have 24 hours to evacuate all prisoners to neutral territory. All of them, not just the humans. After that, I'm coming for your ship. Corvin actually smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression on a Vreldian face. You cannot be serious. My ship has a crew of 300. Advanced weapons. Military-grade shields. 24 hours, Daejung repeated. After that, I add the Crimson Talon to my list of operational achievements. The channel closed. Corvin stood in silence, weighing his options. He couldn't simply destroy the facility now. The broadcasts had gone too far. Galactic Council observers were en route, attracted by the evidence of Vreldian war crimes that had been transmitted across multiple networks. If he destroyed the facility, it would be seen as attempting to eliminate evidence. The political fallout would be devastating, but he also couldn't let a human prisoner dictate terms to the Vreldian Empire. It would be seen as weakness. It would encourage other species to resist. It would undermine everything the Empire had built through centuries of conquest. He made a decision that surprised even himself. He activated his personal communicator and spoke directly to Daejung on a private channel. I cannot give you what you ask. My honor and my duty prevent it. But I can offer you something else. Single combat, you and me. If you win, all prisoners go free. If I win, you and your people surrender. Traditional Vreldian resolution, Daejung said. You're serious about this? I am. It will be broadcast on secure military channels. Other species will witness it. Your people will know you fought with honor. My people will see that I faced you as a warrior, not as prey. There was a longer pause this time. Corvan could almost hear the calculations happening on the other end. The tactical assessment. The risk analysis. Finally, Daejung spoke. I accept. But I have conditions. The fight is unarmed. No weapons. No armor. Just skill. Against. Corvan felt a cold satisfaction. Without his armor and natural advantages, he would still outweigh this human by more than 100 pounds. He had trained in combat for over 60 years. He had killed opponents in single combat that were larger and more dangerous than a human. Agreed, Corvan said. Tomorrow at noon, in the main facility courtyard, may the strongest warrior prevail. He closed the channel and looked at his officers. Prepare the broadcast equipment. The galaxy is about to witness something interesting. What Corvan didn't know was that Daejung was smiling in the darkness of his hidden position. The War Marshal was honorable. He was experienced. He was dangerous. But he had made the same mistake that every opponent eventually made. He had agreed to fight on human terms. And humans had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than themselves. That was what made them human. That was what had carried them from caves to starships. That was what made Dae-jung Kim earn the name Reaper. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn what that name really meant. The arena was nothing special, just a cleared section of the facility's main courtyard with a circle marked in white paint. But the broadcast was being transmitted across secure military channels throughout the sector, watched by commanders and strategists from a dozen different species. Everyone wanted to see if the human called Reaper was as dangerous as the legends suggested. Commander Young-sik Bae and his SEAL team arrived at Carvos 7 just as the broadcast was starting. Their insertion ship docked at the facility's auxiliary port, weapons ready for a firefight. Instead, they found Vreldian guards who directed them politely to the courtyard viewing area. Young-sik felt his chest tighten when he saw Dae-jung standing in the circle, looking small and tired but somehow unbroken. "We came to extract him," Young-sik said to the Vreldian officer, escorting them. "War Marshal Corvin has offered honorable combat," the officer replied. "Your warrior accepted. We will abide by the outcome." Young-sik wanted to argue, but he knew Dae-jung, knew how his mind worked. His brother had turned a desperate situation into a negotiation. Now he was betting everything on one fight. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was exactly what a SEAL would do when backed into a corner. War Marshal Corvin entered the circle from the opposite side. He was massive, his scales gleaming in the cold light of Carvos 7's artificial sun. Without his armor, he was still an impressive figure, all muscle and natural weapons. His claws were visible, his teeth sharp. He had been fighting longer than Dae-jung had been alive. The prisoners watched from behind force fields. Ji-woo gripped the barrier, his knuckles white. Hana had her hand over her mouth. Tae-min looked like he might be sick. Soo-jin stood rigid, her military bearing keeping her emotions contained. But her eyes showed everything. An older Vreldian, serving as referee, spoke the rules. Unarmed combat. No weapons. Victory by submission, incapacitation, or death. May honor guide both warriors. Corvan bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. You have fought well, Lieutenant Kim. Whatever happens here, you have earned recognition as a warrior. Dae-jung returned the bow. You've shown honor, War Marshal. That's rare in my experience with your people. Not all Vreldians are like Overlord Threx, Corvan said. Some of us remember that strength without honor is just brutality. Luden, the referee stepped back. Begin. They circled each other slowly. Corvan moved with the confidence of someone who had won 100 fights like this. Dae-jung moved with the economy of motion that came from SEAL training. Every step calculated. Every breath controlled. Corvan struck first, a testing blow that Dae-jung slipped past easily. The War Marshal followed up with a combination, trying to use his reach advantage. Dae-jung stayed mobile, avoiding rather than blocking, looking for patterns in Corvan's technique. The alien commanders watching the broadcast leaned forward with interest. They had seen humans fight before. Usually, humans relied on weapons and technology to compensate for their physical limitations. This one was different. He moved like water, flowing around attacks instead of meeting them head-on. Corvan tried a grapple, using his superior size to control the engagement. For a moment, it looked like it would work. His arms closed around Dae-jung's torso, starting to squeeze. Vreldian bones were denser than human bones. Vreldian muscles were stronger. This should have been the end. But Dae-jung didn't panic. He used Corvan's grip against him, shifting his weight and striking at pressure points that existed even in alien anatomy. His elbow found a nerve cluster near Corvan's shoulder. His knee hit the War Marshal's inner thigh where blood vessels ran close to the surface. The kind taught in advanced combat courses where you learned to fight opponents who were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than you. Corvan's grip loosened. Dae-jung twisted free and created distance. His breathing was harder now. His ribs probably bruised from that crushing hold. but his eyes were clear and focused. "You've studied Vreldian anatomy," Corvin said, impressed despite himself. "I study everything," Daejung replied. "That's how humans survive." The fight continued. Corvan was more cautious now, respecting his opponent's skill. He tried different approaches: high attacks, low sweeps, feints, and combinations. Each one was met with a defense that was just barely good enough. Daejung was giving ground, looking tired, looking like he was reaching his limit. Young-sik recognized the tactic immediately and had to suppress a smile. Daejung was doing what he always did, making the enemy overconfident, making them think victory was close, drawing them in for the kill. Corvin saw his opportunity. Daejung stumbled, his legs seeming to give out. The war marshal lunged forward for a finishing strike. This was it. This was the moment of victory. Daejung exploded into motion. The stumble had been fake, the weakness an illusion. He slipped inside Corvan's guard, too close for the war marshal's long reach to be effective. His hands moved in a blur, striking nerve clusters, pressure points, joints. It was like watching a surgeon work. Each movement precise and purposeful. Corvin tried to counter, but his arms weren't responding correctly. His leg collapsed. Daejung swept him off his feet and followed him down, applying a joint lock that would work on any bipedal species with similar skeletal structure. The war marshal struggled, his superior strength trying to force a break, but the leverage was perfect. The angle was unbreakable. "Yield," Daejung said quietly. "You fought with honor. Don't throw that away by forcing me to break your arm." For a long moment, Corvin struggled. Pride warred with wisdom. He could feel the lock tightening, feel the joint reaching its limit. This human had defeated him. Not with strength, not with size, with skill, with intelligence, with the kind of tactical thinking that the Vreldians had always believed was their exclusive advantage. "I yield," Corvan said, his translator making the words sound bitter but honest. "The victory is yours, Reaper." Daejung released him immediately and helped him stand. The courtyard was silent. The broadcast channels were silent. No one had expected this. A human defeating a Vreldian war marshal in unarmed combat. A prisoner dictating terms to his captors. It shouldn't have been possible, but it had happened. And every military commander watching would remember. Corvin straightened, holding his injured arm. "The terms are honored. All prisoners will be released to neutral territory. Your people will be returned to Earth. I will recommend to the Empire that we negotiate proper diplomatic channels with humanity rather than treating you as inferior species." He looked at Daejung with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. "What you did here, Lieutenant Kim, turning a prison into a fortress, training civilians to fight, defeating me in combat. This will be studied in our military academies for generations. You have proven that humans are more dangerous than we believed." 23. That's actually Hem. 23. Tenfrenzon, defeating me in combat. Actually Hem. 23. 23. Defeating me in combat. Daejung extended his hand. After a moment, Corvan took it. The handshake was awkward between such different species, but the meaning was clear. Warriors acknowledging each other. Young-sik and his team rushed forward as soon as the circle was cleared. Young-sik grabbed Daejung in a hug that probably hurt his bruised ribs, but neither of them cared. "You crazy bastard," Young-sik said. "We came here to rescue you, and you ended up winning a war." "Not a war," Daejung said tiredly. "Just one battle. But maybe it's enough to start a conversation." The evacuation took 6 hours. Prisoners from multiple species were loaded onto neutral transport ships under the watchful eyes of Galactic Council observers who had arrived just in time to document everything. Hana made sure the medical cases were prioritized. Taemin helped coordinate the engineering side of the evacuation. Jiwoo plotted the safest routes through the asteroid field. Su Jin stayed by Daejung's side, making sure the man who had saved them all didn't collapse before reaching the transport. Overlord Threx was arrested by Vreldian military police. His career was over. His facility had become a symbol of everything wrong with the Empire's approach to conquered species. Korvan, despite his defeat, was treated with honor. He had turned a potential massacre into a demonstration of warrior culture. That counted for something. As the human transport prepared to leave, Korvan met Daejung one final time at the docking bay. "The galaxy will remember what happened here," the war marshal said. "Humanity has proven itself. That will change things. Some for the better. Some will fear you more now." "Fear is better than contempt," Daejung replied. "We don't want to be loved. We just want to be left alone, to live our lives. But if someone forces our hand, they'll learn what millions of years of surviving on a deadly world taught us." Korvan nodded slowly. "Your world made you into hunters. Into survivors. We underestimated that. We won't make that mistake again." The transport lifted off, carrying the freed prisoners toward neutral space where Earth's ships waited. In the observation window, Daejung watched Carvos 7 shrink in the distance. Beside him, Jiwoo, Hana, Taemin, and Sujin stood together, bound by what they had survived. "What happens now?" Taemin asked. "Now we go home," Daejung said. "You all get to return to your lives. Tell your stories. Remember that you survived." "What about you?" Sujin asked. "Back to being the ghost in the dark?" Daejung smiled slightly. "Something like that. The galaxy knows the name Reaper now. That changes the equation. Maybe it makes the next operation easier. Maybe it makes it harder. But it sends a message." "What message?" Hana asked. "That humans don't break. That we don't quit. That we'll find a way to win, even when the odds say we should lose." He looked at each of them. "That's what humanity for you means. Whatever happens, whatever the enemy thinks they know about us, we'll always find a way. One. One. One." Back on Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo Nam watched the broadcasts and smiled. The diplomatic channels were already buzzing with activity. 3 other alien governments had sent requests to open formal negotiations. 2 more had requested information on human military capabilities. The Vreldian Empire was facing political pressure to reform its treatment of conquered species. 1 man, 1 prison break, 1 fight. And the galaxy's perception of humanity had shifted. That night, in the quiet moments before sleep, Daejung Kim allowed himself to feel the weight of what had happened. He had been captured. He had been tested. And he had proven something that needed proving. Not that humans were the strongest. Not that they were the fastest. But that they were survivors. Adaptable. Relentless. Dangerous when cornered. The name Reaper would echo through alien military channels for years to come. A reminder that the small, short-lived species from the blue world wasn't to be underestimated. That humanity had teeth. And when those teeth were bared, even empires learned to step carefully. Outside his window, stars shined in the endless dark. Somewhere out there, other humans were living their lives, unaware that their species had just earned respect through blood and determination. They would learn eventually. They would hear the stories, and they would understand what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had thought them weak. They would learn that weakness was just another weapon in the right hands, and that the species called Homo sapiens had been using that trick for a very, very long time.